Well, howdy folks, Jeff here. Thanks for tuning in to the Speaker Builder channel. Feel free to check out some of the other videos I have posted on speaker building, my favorite hobby. So today I wanted to do a video on this system that I built 10 years ago. And one of the challenges I've had of doing that is that I can't show you from start to finish building this system because it's already been rebuilt. I didn't buy a video camera until maybe 5 years ago. So. But I've been wanting to do this video to talk about this system since it is the reference system upon which everything else gets compared. And so it makes sense to do a video on this one. Let's go through what this system's all about and a bit of a history on this first. That after building a number of speaker systems, you know, I built speakers back in the 70s and you didn't know anything about what I was doing. And then I got the Speaker Builder magazine, part of Audio Engineering Society's publications. A friend of mine turned me on to that, and it opened the whole world up to me about what real good quality speaker building was all about. So began building speakers, doing high quality stuff after that in the 80s. And then decided at the end, before I would get into graduate school and get into other things, I wanted to build sort of one final system. And so the design involved a pair of satellites, much like these, and these bass boxes, these same bass boxes. And then that turntable was a part of that system, and then everything else has been replaced. It also had a control amplifier and a CD player and an amplifier and a crossover and all that. So that system was kind of a hybrid of what most systems are, a full range passive speaker system that I've done, and a full active system like this. The system I built 25 years ago was an in-between those, and in that it had passive satellite speakers. They're here to my right, but I've shown those in some of the other videos, shown one of those as an example of a passive satellite speaker. These are the active ones. So those were the passive side, and then the signal from the preamp went through a control amplifier, through an electronic crossover. It was a really cool component made by Audio Control. I'm using Audio Control active crossovers for the truck speakers. So Audio Control made this device called the Richter scale, and it had really cool features, but one of them was an electronic crossover. With a filter fixed at 90 cycles, I actually adjusted it to 150 cycles, but in that range. And it's really for bass speakers, and so, or a single subwoofer if you wanted. So, in coming from a world of big boxes with 10 or 12-inch drivers in them, and then a mid-range, and then a tweeter in each box, I thought I would have two bass boxes rather than I don't know if single subwoofers were popular back then, if anyone was doing that. Nobody was doing this, I guess. So, two pair of satellites that had passive crossovers, and then an electronic crossover to split the signal between the high-pass side for the satellites and low-pass to the bass boxes. So that was the original system I had. And then doing recording about 10 to 15 years ago, and not hearing what I needed to hear, I decided to take that system downstairs and really use that for monitoring rather than buy another better system or something. And so I was left up here without a system, having already bought this control amplifier you see, and on the left, and the CD player and that bass amp on the left. So, but I wanted to upgrade this system, and so I decided to go three-way electronic crossover and three-way, so it's basically a three-way active speaker system. And to replace the drivers, start with new drivers. And I'll talk about those as I go. I'm actually going to go from starting with the control amplifier, and I'll take us through how the system's constructed so that folks can see that. Now, I'm not expecting people to run out and get excited about building this system. It is by far the cleanest system I've ever heard, but then I thought my old speaker system was the cleanest I'd ever heard. So is there a upgrade to this system? Yeah, there's some things I could do that would be, but it's stupid money to get into some of the upgrades. For example, tube amplifiers for the tweeters and tube amplifier for the mid-range drivers, $2,000 a piece. I just don't have the stomach for that. That's just too crazy. That's just not, I mean, I just added up with my calculator the cost of the monies that I've put into this system as you see it right here, and it's $5,000. So that's just nuts. you got to be out of your mind to spend that kind of money on a stereo system, right? And so I'm not expecting people to go out and build this. I had a guy very interested in speaker building, came over here. I started him out with very basic passive two-way passive speaker system, and then went to the active two-way speaker system and listened to that downstairs. Then I brought him up here and listened to this system, and of course he hears this and he's blown away. And he says, "This is what I want, Jeff." Well, that's crazy. He doesn't have $5,000 to spend. So again, I'm not expecting people to run off and want to build this, but for those who are interested in what I'm doing here and what maybe that would be the purpose here, is to help you if you're unsatisfied with your system and you say, "I want a really awesome top of the line system. What would it take?" Well, if you have $5,000, you can get into this range. And if you have 10 or 15 or 20, I could spend that. We could spend 20 grand. It's just nuts. I can't justify that. So this is about as far as I could go, and I did do this over stages over years' time. So a couple $1,000s back in the late 80s, and then a couple thousand again about 10 years ago. So let me go through. We'll move the camera, and we'll go through I'll zoom in here on the components, and we'll take a look at each one and what they do, so you understand how the system works. So we're going to start with the control amplifier. It's kind of the heart of the system. It is the component through which all the other signal sources pass, and then it sends those signals independently out to the rest of the system. And so control is a proper name for it, control amplifier. The word amplifier is a bit of a misnomer. In fact, it doesn't really amplify the signals. It actually attenuates the signal. So you get a 2-volt signal coming in from, say, the CD player, and that signal, if it will pass through with the volume all the way up, you would get full gain to the amplifier. So you have to take that line level signal and attenuate it in order to keep the thing from killing you. So it's really an attenuation device. But the amplification, preamplification actually, it's also called a preamplifier, is only happening at the phono input, in which you have a very, very tiny piece of a volt going in, and it has to be preamplified up to line level, equivalent to what a CD player or the DVD player or whatever will put out. So it really is, again, sort of the central control unit. Nice thing about this one, it has a remote control for the volume and the control for the various input sources from your seating position. You get the little lights, you can tell where you are in your volume level. And so your signal goes through here and then is passed from here to the electronic crossover. Now, in a normal system, you could pass from here to a single amplifier and then to a set of speakers with a passive crossover in those speakers. But we're going to go electronic crossover, full active system, and so every single driver has an amplifier attached to it. So we have to do all the crossing over before the amplifiers. So this signal coming out of the control amplifier then has to pass directly to an electronic crossover. So we're going to introduce this unit next. If you go to the hi-fi shops and you tell them you want to do an active 3-way speaker system for your stereo, they will look at you maybe like you got a third eye. Now, this has actually been done. I remember back playing Boston clubs back in the 80s, and I remember a guy doing sound for us, and he had an active 3-way speaker system with an electronic crossover and 3 sets of stereo amplifiers running his horn tweeters, his mid-range drivers, and his bass bins. And so it has been done way back, and I remembered that, talking to him about that. So I told him I wanted that system on my house. He said I was nuts. But anyway, but you can't buy these for the home. At least I think they had them way back, and then by the time I went to do this 10 years ago, I could not find any electronic crossovers. They had them for Pro Sound, but not for home hi-fi. And you need a home hi-fi system that has the requirements of noise, limited noise and all that. So I went around online and found this guy, Phil Marchand. He has an electronics company, a sole proprietor company, in which he designs and builds various things. He has probably providers that actually construct the components for him, and then he sells them, probably designs them himself, and he's known for his electronic crossovers. That's one of his central things he does. He also has amplifiers and all kind of cool stuff for building stuff. But the electronic crossovers, he can sell you a 3-way or a 2-way or even a 4th-way crossover, completely constructed, or in this case, it was a kit. he can sell you a kit was you have to actually assemble the components on the circuit board. I didn't want to take that on, but I did buy the kit. The completed unit was $1,000, I think, and this kit was $600 or something. So not cheap. He really wants to do only real high-end stuff, and that's what I was after. So that was a good match. Not for the light of heart. You got to really decide you're going to spend some real money to chase after the sound. Now the way this thing works, it's really, really cool. Obviously you got 6 knobs in the front. It looks really esoteric, and you couldn't probably sell this in a hi-fi shop to look at this and say, what in the world, this is too complicated. But so you have on the right channel, you have a high pass, mid pass, low, high, mid, and low. And these actually are the, again, attenuation circuits for sending the signal to the amplifier. So this would go to the tweeter amp, right and left, mid-range amp, right and left, and bass amp, right and left. And they're fixed positions so that they lock into certain positions so that you can be sure to balance the right and left channel accurately. And so what's really cool about the way this is designed, I won't take it apart and show you, but it's got these channels with several places in which to insert filter cards, and you can insert up to 4 filter cards in each channel. And of course in the high pass, you're going to put in a high pass filter in the first channel for the tweeter, and it's only going to filter out from, high pass from everything from, say, 3,000 cycles up. That's all that needs to go in that channel. And then this one, for the mid-range, you've got to put a low pass from 3,000 cycles down, and then you have to put another filter in, a high pass from 100 or 150 cycles up. So that now this channel only reproduces those mid-range frequencies from 100, 150 up to 3,000. And then in the last channel, you have a low-pass filter that filters everything from 100, 150 cycles, whatever your frequency choice is, down. And also, I put in a high pass at 20 cycles, so that the low frequency network does not produce anything above 20 cycles. And that's only really a problem with the turntable, where you're going to get, through our playing of records, you might get some what's known as infrasonic or below the hearing level frequencies. And with amplifiers that will produce all the way down to 1 or 2 cycles a second, you don't want, you can reproduce those and send them out to your speakers, and you'll get a lot of cone motion that is below hearing threshold. You don't want that. So you put a 20 cycle filter in there so that anything below 20 cycles is attenuated, 3rd or 4th order. I think 4th order in this case. So that's basically what an electronic crossover does. It just does all your filtering before the amplifiers. And again, the challenge then is you need 3, for this 3-way system, you need 3 separate amplifiers. And so that's the real kind of a gotcha on this. And you want matching amplifiers for your tweeter drivers and your mid-range drivers. So, and when I put this together, Rotel was making I love Rotel, so I buy a lot of their stuff because they're high-end for not crazy money. They're not the best manufacturer of components at all, but the other guys are just stupid crazy money. So Rotel is expensive, they're nice, they're high quality, but they're not crazy. So that's the middle of the range. $500 a piece for these. And that really is middle of the range. You go, look, oh my gosh, you spend $2,000 for transistor amps, and then $2-3 grand for tube amps. So matching amps here I had to buy those to go with this rebuild 10 years ago. And then the bass amp I had already purchased. So I have the output of the tweeters, the high pass out going to the tweeter amp, and then those speaker wires are connected and go to just to the tweeters, and then the mid-range out, mid-out go to the mid-range amp, and those speaker wires connect to the mid-range drivers, and then the bass, of course, out to the bass drivers. So that's basically what this system is. That sort of takes us through what all these components are and what they do. And let's take a look at the speakers next. We'll look at the bass speaker first, and then the satellites. Now with the bass drivers today, most folks are using just a single bass driver called a sub, and they're not usually this big. This is an awfully big one. This is a vented 12-inch, and for vented alignment, you need a big box. So most people are doing a sealed box, and then they're EQing it because the sealed box won't produce below 50 cycles. So you just EQ it and force it to produce signals below that. I don't like the sound of sealed boxes at all, so I want to do vented. And it just means for a 12-inch driver, you've got to be in a big box. And then I've got 2 of these, so that's really nuts. Well, why 2? Well, I think if I think back to the days out of which I came 25 years ago, putting this system together. Most systems back then, they were not satellites like we've seen in the system. They were a pair of two big boxes, 20 liters, or rather 40 liters, a cubic foot and a half usually in size. And they had a 10 or 12 inch driver in it, a bass driver, and then a mid-range and a tweeter. So your stereo system had two bass drivers, two mid-range drivers, two tweeters. And so that's maybe the context under which I'm coming that probably drove me to select and build two bass boxes and two bass drivers. Now, of course, I love bass. I play bass for the church, so I just love bass low-end response and all the wonderful bass players in the jazz world playing those 5-string basses, a nice low end. So I want to really hear that low end nice. So, and nothing like a 12-inch driver in a 3 cubic foot box. That's solid and it doesn't vibrate itself. And to get that low end, and have two of them. Now you play the 1812 Overture with the cannons, and it really can rock the room a little bit. So that's kind of the stuff I really like when I want to hear. So you got to have two drivers. Now these boxes are 25 years old. I built these way back in the day, and I think as I played with them years after that, and I could put a signal generator through them, and I could make these boxes vibrate. So I think I'm gotten better at building these and could do a better job. Now these drivers are replacements. The original drivers I put in here I hand tuned, and they worked really, really well. But the port was up front, and that's you don't really do that anymore. So I'm not doing that anymore. You don't really want frequencies coming out of the port that may be out of phase with the driver. So you put the port in back, which I've done. So I sealed these off when I rebuilt these. These drivers actually belong in a 2 cubic foot box, and I did put these in a 2 cubic foot box, built another pair of these that are smaller, and oh my gosh, they sound terrible. So I put them into this box and got an alignment for 3 cubic feet from Matasound where I bought these, and they work okay. I'm not that happy with them. So what I want to do is buy the SB bass drivers, but they're $180 a piece, and they require a 4 cubic foot box, which would be quite a bit taller than these. So that's a project I want to do someday, but that's what these are all about. So let me talk about I think that's all. Let me talk about the satellites next. Now the satellite speakers are probably the most important because they obviously produce the majority of the sound into the room. And so selection here is absolutely critical for both the drivers and the kind of box. Maybe not the kind of box is so critical, but certainly the drivers. And we'll talk a bit about the speaker wire driving these. But so again, remember there's a separate amplifier for each of these. There's no passive crossover in here. So these just sit in the box and then you run wires to them. That's it, pretty easy. You can buy nice satellite boxes if you want it from Parts Express, and they have a nice curved back to them. So they're really cool. Instead of building these 5-sided boxes, I just started building another set today for the next project. Just love building 5-sided boxes. They're so cool. So because you eliminate that parallel back wall for the mid-range driver. So for driver selection here, there's lots of good drivers at Matasound available if you wanted to do satellites. And this you could do anyway, and you could do the single sub, and we'll talk about this. The next project I do are going to be satellites in a single sub. And that'll be an under $600 project, so you're looking at this system for $5,000. And can I do something for $600? Well, I'm going to try, and we'll see how that works. But drivers are critical, and so if you want to build a system, the system I'll recommend for the under 600 has some cheapy drivers. They sound real good. I'm listening to them in my truck system. They sound good, but obviously you get what you pay for. So the $50 a piece drivers, the CAs and the SBs, for quality would be your sort of not the lowest end, but down there in that range. These were $100 a piece. Now these are all Focals. Focal for years has been the premier driver manufacturer, in my humble opinion. Now, I never really got to hear Etons. There's Matasound has a pair of Eton tweeters and a pair of Eton mid-range drivers that look wonderful, and they're on sale. They're a little over $100, $110 a piece, and that's a real good money. So I just don't have $400 to throw just for fun, but otherwise I'd love to get those and try them. But I have listened to a lot of other hard dome tweeters, not near as expensive as these. These are the TC120s, and nothing even comes close to these for the clarity of these. These are absolutely astounding. So a lot of the magic of this system is these darn tweeters. They're astoundingly clean. And then a really good high-quality mid-range driver that has some really nice features. Again, these Focal drivers. When I bought these, Focal had gone out of the driver manufacturing's individual drivers business. They still make systems for the car, and they make satellite systems that are all complete, but they don't make raw drivers anymore for the home. So they made for the car, but not for the home, not like these. So there's a couple guys in California that have a leftover stock of these. Not this exact one, but its close brother, and virtually the same, the TC120s. And so I remember spending, again, $100 a piece for these. And then a couple of years after that, I was so afraid that I would not be able to get these again that I bought another pair of tweeters and then a pair of mid-rangers drivers. Again, not exactly the same in the mid-range, but virtually the same in the TC120s. And I'll do a project with those at some point, but just to have spares, because these are so astounding. I think the mid-range isn't so critical. I think the Etons would sound great here. But oh my gosh, these Focal tweeters, they really are key. So that's the satellite speakers. If you're going to build satellites, spend as much money as you have for good quality mid-range and tweeters. The other thing about these speakers I will say quickly is that this was designed with the alignment of these drivers for a vented cabinet, and so that they're somewhat large because they required a large vented cabinet. But the guys at Metasound tell me, don't do a vented alignment for a satellite speaker, do a sealed alignment. So future satellite speakers I build now will be sealed. And but nonetheless, I got a vent in the back, and so and let me show you that as I move the camera around, the speaker wire and how I wire those in. So you can see the wires. I'm not a fan of putting a cup in here and having connections and having to put speaker wires onto that cup and having additional connection. It's additional expense, and it's an additional connection that can corrode, and so why do that? So I run my speaker wires at this end directly into the box and solder directly to the drivers. So that's maybe really being kind of crazy picky, but if I want to disconnect these speakers, I disconnect them at the amplifier end. They're connected at the amplifier end with connectors, expensive ones. And then here's your port in the back where it belongs, unlike remember the sub bases boxes, I had the port in the front originally. So here it is in the back where it belongs, but it's not of any utility here because this port would really function below, down at the system resonance, which is down around maybe 75 cycles or something. And this system isn't going down that low. It's going down 100, 150 cycles, and then it's attenuated through the electronic crossover. So port doesn't have much utility. So I'd stick my wires into the port, and they go directly then to the... And this speaker wire, by the way, is a really esoteric stuff. I don't know how you can see it. I can't find this stuff, so I don't really need to spend a lot of time talking about it. I can't find it anymore, but it's a multi-strand flat copper wire, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4 on one, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 on the other. So you got plus and you got minus. And I've actually now rewired these, so it's plus, minus, and then plus, minus. Really esoteric kind of crazy stuff, but to balance that system out. Did that rewiring make any difference? It's hard to say. So that's the speaker wires anyway. And as an alternative, in a lot of my systems, you'll see me utilizing the the FT4 wire. So I talk about that in some of the other projects. So when you look at those, you'll see that FT4 wire I'm using instead of this because I can't get this stuff anymore. So one last final comment now. There are a couple of ways that I probably could improve the quality of this system. One of them I just did, actually. I've heard about this and never really chased it down, and that is power conditioners. So a power conditioner basically tries to smooth out the electrical current going into the system, and if you think about that, it makes a lot of sense. The AC power is driving everything in this system, and so the quality of that AC power can have an effect sonically on the music that you hear. So I didn't go crazy and buy this. There's Furman power conditioners that actually regulate the voltage, and they're hundreds of dollars. And I decided at the very least I needed a power conditioner that would protect my stuff from surges and all that stuff. And I actually hooked up my TV to it as well. So, but the power conditioner I just installed last week, and it did make a difference. It's not a huge difference. But it's a slightly but noticeable difference. The system sounds more analog. It sounds more smooth. The bass has definitely been impacted. The bass sounds more round and full. So pretty surprising that just a power conditioner. And with the power conditioner I bought, the Furman, was $90. So it wasn't a huge amount of money. Second upgrade rather I could make to this system I mentioned before was that the audio cables going from the control amplifier to the crossover, that cable is carrying full signal, bass, mid, and highs. And that's a tough thing for a single cable apparently to do well. And so the more higher quality of the cable, the better that sound will be. Post crossover, each cable is only carrying, for example, the highs or the mids or the lows. So no one cable is being burdened with the entire frequency spectrum. That's also true of the speaker wire, by the way, as well, which also matters. That the speaker wires are only carrying, in the example that we just the high end, or in the mid-range, just the mid-ranges, or in the bass driver speaker wires, just the bass low-end frequencies. So splitting it all out like that helps on the other end, both at the line level going to the amplifiers and post-amplifier, the speaker cables. So a lot of advantages. And I think I missed something, but I think the only other upgrade that I really would consider doing if money were no object, and that would be tube amplifiers for the tweeter and the mid-range. And I've looked at, there's a couple of tube amps available by a Chinese company, and they're $700 a piece for them, for each stereo amp. So another $1,500, or if I go to the hi-fi shop and they sell me, oh, you got to have these tube amp or that tube amp, and they're $2,000 a piece or $3,000 a piece. So, and building one even from scratch, I had built tube amps back in the day, and it's a lot. It's going to be a lot of money and a lot of work. So, I don't know. I don't think I'll do the tube thing. I may replace that input cable at some point, and the power conditioner made a difference. And you can always get a new phono cartridge and stuff like that. So. Well, that's pretty much it for this active three-way speaker system. See you next time.